My name is Roger Wilson, I'm 62 years old, and I've been a mechanic in the small town of Springfield, Illinois for over 40 years. 35 years of marriage to Dorothy had flown by like a single day. Or at least that's what I thought until that Tuesday in November 2023, when everything I believed about my life crumbled with one accidentally sent text message. I had just gotten home from work, my hands still smelling of motor oil and grease, when I heard the familiar chime of my phone. Looking at the screen, I saw a message from Dorothy. Hey sweetheart, can't meet tonight. Roger came home early from work. See you tomorrow at our usual spot. Miss you so much already. Kiss mark red heart. I stood there in my own kitchen, staring at those words, reading them over and over again. The meaning slowly sank in like ice water filling my veins. Dorothy was writing to someone about me in third person. She had a usual spot with someone. She missed someone who wasn't me. My wife of 35 years, the mother of my 2 children, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone in this world, had a lover. And she had just accidentally sent me a message meant for him. I sank into my recliner in the living room, the same chair where I'd watched thousands of evenings of news, where I'd fallen asleep countless times after long days at the garage. Now it felt like sitting in a stranger's house. When I heard Dorothy's car in the driveway, I quickly hid my phone and tried to compose myself. She walked in with grocery bags, humming softly, something she did when she was happy. Hi honey, how was your day? She asked, kissing my cheek like she had thousands of times before. Fine, I managed to say. How about yours? Oh, the usual. Went to see Linda, then stopped at the store. Nothing special. Linda. Her best friend since college. I wondered if Linda knew about this affair. Was she covering for Dorothy? How many people in our small town knew what I didn't? That night at dinner we talked about ordinary things, the weather, our kids who lived in other states' weekend plans. But every word Dorothy spoke sounded different now. I found myself studying her face, searching for signs I might have missed, clues that would explain how I could have been so blind. The next few days were torture. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, could barely focus at work. My co-workers at Henderson's Auto Repair started asking if I was feeling all right. How do you tell people that your entire life has been revealed as a lie? I began paying attention to things I'd previously ignored. Dorothy did go to Linda's house more often lately. She'd also developed new errands that took her away from home for hours. Her phone, which used to sit casually on counters and tables, was now constantly with her, even when she showered. A week after receiving that message, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable to me before. While Dorothy was at the grocery store, I searched through her belongings. In our bedroom, hidden in the back of her nightstand drawer behind some old photographs, I found a second phone. It was an old flip phone, the kind you could buy at any convenience store with cash. When I opened it, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely navigate the simple menu. There was only one contact saved, J. The text message history made me nauseous. Messages going back 4 months, filled with intimate conversations, plans for secret meetings, expressions of affection that should have been mine. I learned that his name was Jeremy, that he was 58, divorced, and worked at First National Bank in the neighboring town of Riverside. What struck me most wasn't just the betrayal itself, but the elaborate planning that had gone into it. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a one-time mistake. This was a carefully orchestrated deception that had been going on right under my nose for months. One message from Dorothy particularly cut deep. Roger's working late again tonight. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I disappeared entirely. You make me feel alive again, Jay. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and waited. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for her to confess, maybe for this nightmare to end, maybe for the courage to confront her. But 2 days later, something happened that I never could have anticipated. I was under the hood of a '98 Ford pickup at the shop when my coworker Jake called out, "Roger, there's a police officer here to see you." My blood turned to ice. Had Dorothy told Jeremy about her suspicious husband? Was I in some kind of trouble? Officer Martinez approached with the grave expression cops wear when delivering bad news. "Mr. Roger Wilson?" "That's me." "Sir, I need to speak with you about your wife, Dorothy Wilson." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What happened? Is she okay?" "Mr. Wilson, your wife was involved in a serious car accident this morning. She's at Springfield General Hospital. She's alive, but she's been injured." I dropped my wrench and ran to my truck without even taking off my work clothes. All thoughts of betrayal and secret phones vanished. Whatever Dorothy had done, she was still my wife, still the mother of my children. At the hospital, Dr. Stevens explained that Dorothy had sustained a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs and a fractured wrist. "She's stable," he assured me, but she'll need to stay here for observation for at least a few days. Was anyone else hurt? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Dr. Stevens consulted his chart. Actually, yes. There was a male passenger in the vehicle. Jeremy Walker, age 58. He sustained minor injuries, some bruising and a mild concussion. He was treated and released about an hour ago. Jeremy. The man whose messages I'd been reading, whose relationship with my wife had been conducted in shadows and lies, had been in the car with Dorothy when she crashed. They hadn't just been meeting secretly, they'd been together in broad daylight, driving somewhere when the accident happened. Do you know Mr. Walker? Dr. Stevens asked, studying my face. No, I lied. I don't know him. Dorothy was unconscious when I first saw her in the hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and 4 tubes. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way I hadn't seen since she'd given birth to our children decades ago. Despite everything, my first instinct was to protect her. She woke up that evening while I was dozing in the chair beside her bed. When she opened her eyes and saw me, she immediately started crying. Roger, I'm so sorry. I can explain everything. Don't, I said quietly. I already know about Jeremy. I know about the messages, the meetings, everything. She looked shocked. How long have you known? Since you sent me that text message by mistake last week. Dorothy closed her eyes and more tears leaked out. I never wanted you to find out this way. How did you want me to find out? Or were you planning to keep lying to me forever? She was quiet for a long time. Finally she whispered, I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. How long has this been going on? 4 months, she admitted. 4 months. 1/3 of a year. While I was fixing cars, coming home to dinner, planning our retirement, she was living a double life. Why? It was the only question that mattered. Dorothy stared at the ceiling. I felt invisible, Roger. Like I was fading away. The kids are grown and gone. You work all the time. I'm 60 years old and I felt like my life was just over. Then I met Jeremy at the bank and he made me feel young again. Beautiful again. Important. I understood the words, but they felt like they were spoken in a foreign language. So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about how you felt? I tried to talk to you. How many times did I suggest we take that trip to Colorado? Or ask if you wanted to take dancing lessons like the Hendersons did? You always said we'd do it later when you weren't so busy at the shop. She was right and I hated that she was right. I had been putting off things Dorothy wanted to do. But that didn't justify what she'd done. Where were you going today? I asked. When the accident happened? Dorothy looked away. We were going to look at an apartment. In Riverside. Jeremy wanted us to move in together. The room seemed to spin. This wasn't just an affair. Dorothy had been planning to leave me entirely. The apartment viewing, the careful planning, the secret phone, it had all been leading to this moment when she would disappear from my life completely. Were you going to tell me or just leave one day? I was going to tell you after Thanksgiving. I didn't want to ruin the holiday for the kids. Thanksgiving was 2 weeks away. In 2 weeks, Dorothy had been planning to announce that our marriage was over, that she was moving in with a man I'd never heard of until today. Over the next 3 days, while Dorothy recovered in the hospital, I found myself in a strange limbo. During the day, I sat by her bedside, helping her eat, talking to doctors, calling our adult children to reassure them that Mom was going to be okay. At night, I went home to our empty house and stared at the walls, trying to figure out what my life was going to look like now. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. A woman I'd never seen before approached me in the hospital cafeteria. Excuse me, are you Roger Wilson? She was probably in her mid-50s, well-dressed, with kind eyes that looked tired. Yes, that's me. I'm Susan Walker, Jeremy's ex-wife. My coffee suddenly tasted like acid. Oh. She sat down across from me without being invited. I think we should talk. I don't know what there is to say. Susan studied my face. Jeremy told me about the accident. And about Dorothy. I wanted to meet you because I think there are things you should know. Such as. Jeremy isn't who he pretends to be, Mr. Wilson. This isn't his first affair with a married woman. It's a pattern with him. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What do you mean? We've been divorced for 3 years. Do you know why? I shook my head. Because I caught him having affairs with 3 different women over the course of 2 years. All of them married. All of them around age 60. Jeremy has a very specific type and a very specific method. Susan pulled a manila folder from her purse. These are copies of emails, text messages, and photos I collected during our divorce proceedings. I thought you should see them. The folder contained evidence of Jeremy's previous affairs, including messages that were almost identical to the ones I'd seen on Dorothy's secret phone. The same phrases, the same promises, even some of the same meeting locations. He told Dorothy she was special, didn't he? Susan continued. That she made him feel alive again? That he'd never felt this way about anyone before? Each word was like a physical blow. Yes. He said the same things to Karen Martinez and to Patricia Coleman and to Rebecca Hayes. They were all married women who felt neglected by their husbands. Jeremy is very good at identifying vulnerable women and telling them exactly what they want to hear. Why are you telling me this? Susan's expression softened. Because Patricia Coleman killed herself 6 months ago when Jeremy dumped her for the next woman. She left behind a husband who loved her and 2 grown children who still blame themselves for not seeing the signs. I don't want that to happen to anyone else. I stared at the documents spread across the cafeteria table. Dorothy doesn't know about this. No, I'm sure she doesn't. Jeremy is very careful to make each woman feel like she's the only one, the special one who finally made him understand what love really means. That evening, I returned to Dorothy's hospital room with Susan's folder hidden in my jacket. Dorothy was awake, looking out the window at the parking lot. How are you feeling? I asked. Better. Dr. Stevens says I can probably go home tomorrow. I sat down in the chair beside her bed. Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She turned to look at me and I could see fear in her eyes. Did Jeremy ever tell you that you were the first woman he'd felt this way about since his divorce? That you made him understand what real love was? Dorothy's face went pale. How could you possibly know that? I pulled out Susan's folder. Because he said the exact same things to at least 3 other women in the past 2 years. All married. All around your age. All of whom he eventually abandoned when he found someone new. Dorothy stared at the folder like it might explode. What are you talking about? Jeremy's ex-wife came to see me today. She wanted me to know who we're really dealing with. I spread the documents across Dorothy's hospital bed, photos of Jeremy with other women, copies of text messages that were almost word-for-word identical to the ones he'd sent Dorothy, even documentation of the apartment in Riverside that he'd apparently used for previous affairs. Dorothy read through everything in silence, her face growing paler with each page. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. He told me I was different. That I was special. I know he did. The apartment we were going to look at, he's used it before? According to his ex-wife, yes. It's a rental property he keeps specifically for affairs. Dorothy closed her eyes and leaned back against her pillows. I'm such a fool. No, you're not. He's apparently very good at manipulating people. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Dorothy spoke again. Roger, I know I don't have any right to ask this, but do you think we could try to work things out? Could you ever forgive me? I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 35 years. The mother of my children. The person I'd shared more of my life with than anyone else. 3 weeks ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But too much had happened, too much trust had been broken. I don't know, Dorothy. I honestly don't know. The next day, I brought Dorothy home from the hospital. She moved carefully, still sore from her injuries, and I helped her to the couch in our living room. The house felt different now, like a museum of our former life together. I'm going to stay in the guest room for a while, I told her. Until we figure things out. She nodded. I understand. Over the next few days, we moved around each other like polite strangers. I brought her meals, helped her with tasks that were difficult due to her injuries, made sure she was taking her medications. But we didn't really talk about anything important. A week later, Dorothy told me that Jeremy had called her. He wants to see me, she said. He says the accident made him realize how much I mean to him. What did you tell him? I told him I knew about the other women. About Patricia Coleman and Karen Martinez and Rebecca Hayes. How did he react? Dorothy's laugh was bitter. He said Susan was lying, trying to cause trouble because she couldn't accept their divorce. He had an explanation for everything. Do you believe him? She was quiet for a long time. I want to. Isn't that pathetic? Even knowing what I know, part of me still wants to believe that I was special to him. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. Part of me still wanted to believe that our marriage had been real, that the woman I'd loved for 35 years was still the person I thought she was. 2 weeks later, our daughter Jennifer came home from Denver for Thanksgiving. She immediately sensed the tension between Dorothy and me. What's going on with you two? She asked me privately while Dorothy was napping. I told her everything. About the accidental text message, about Jeremy, about the accident and what we'd learned from Susan Walker. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression growing more shocked with each revelation. "I can't believe Mom would do something like this," she said finally. "Neither could I. Are you going to get divorced?" "I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out." Thanksgiving dinner was awkward and strained. Our son Marcus flew in from Portland with his wife and 2 kids, and we all pretended that everything was normal. But I caught Jennifer watching Dorothy and me throughout the meal, and I knew she was seeing the distance between us. The day after Thanksgiving, Dorothy made a decision that surprised everyone. "I'm going to see Jeremy today," she announced at breakfast. "Dorothy, I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "I need to hear his side of the story. I need to look him in the eye and ask him about those other women. What if Susan Walker was telling the truth? Then I'll know for sure. And if she wasn't?" "If she wasn't what? You're going to leave me for him anyway?" Dorothy looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I don't know, Roger. I just know I can't move forward with my life until I understand what really happened." She left the house around noon. I spent the afternoon in my workshop, trying to distract myself by organizing tools and cleaning workbenches. But I kept checking my watch, wondering where she was and what she was learning. Dorothy didn't come home that night. At first, I tried to tell myself she was just taking time to process whatever Jeremy had told her. But by morning, when she still hadn't returned or called, I was genuinely worried. I was debating whether to call the police when my phone rang. It was Susan Walker. "Mr. Wilson? I think you should know that Jeremy never went back to work after the accident. He cleaned out his desk at the bank the next day and moved out of his apartment." "What do you mean?" "I mean he's gone. Disappeared. And according to my sources at the bank, he took a significant amount of money with him." My blood turned to ice. "Dorothy went to see him yesterday. She hasn't come home." "Oh God. Mr. Wilson, I think Jeremy may have been planning this for a while. Running away, I mean. And if Dorothy was with him?" I hung up and immediately called the police. Detective Hayes took my statement and put out a missing person bulletin for both Dorothy and Jeremy. He also contacted the FBI, since it appeared that Jeremy might have fled across state lines with stolen money. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I called our kids and told them what was happening. Jennifer flew back from Denver immediately. Marcus wanted to come too, but I convinced him to stay in Portland with his family until we knew more. On the 3rd day, Detective Hayes called with news. "We found them," he said. "They're in a hotel in Las Vegas. Local police have Jeremy in custody on embezzlement charges. Your wife is okay. Is she under arrest too?" "No, sir. It appears she was unaware of Jeremy's financial crimes. She's agreed to fly back to Illinois voluntarily." Dorothy arrived home the next evening, looking 10 years older than when she'd left. Jennifer picked her up at the airport while I waited at home, not sure I was ready to see her yet. When they walked through the front door, Dorothy looked at me with hollow eyes. "He lied about everything," she said simply. "What happened?" Dorothy sat down heavily on the couch. "When I confronted Jeremy about the other women, he admitted it was all true. He said he was a sex addict, that he couldn't help himself, but that what we had was different. Special." She laughed bitterly. "Even when he was confessing to manipulating me, he was still trying to manipulate me." "So why didn't you come home?" "Because then he told me he was leaving town. That he'd been planning to disappear for months, and the accident had just moved up his timeline. He asked me to come with him." "And you said yes?" Dorothy nodded. "I was so confused, so hurt. I thought maybe if I went with him I could figure out what was real and what wasn't. I thought maybe I could still salvage something from this mess I'd made." "What changed your mind?" "We got to Las Vegas and Jeremy started talking about the money he'd taken from the bank. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that he'd been skimming from accounts for over a year. He had it all planned out, new identities, a house in Mexico, a whole new life." Dorothy looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Roger, I realized that I didn't know this man at all. I'd thrown away 35 years of marriage for someone who turned out to be a complete stranger. A criminal. I didn't know what to say to that. I told him I was coming home," she continued. "That I'd made a terrible mistake. He got angry, said I was just scared that I'd regret it. But I knew I wouldn't. Whatever problems you and I have, whatever issues led me to do what I did, running away with a man who steals from banks wasn't going to solve them." Over the next few weeks, Dorothy and I tried to talk about what had happened and what we wanted to do going forward. She was full of remorse and promises to change. She wanted to go to marriage counseling, to take that trip to Colorado we talked about, to rebuild what we'd lost. But I found that I couldn't get past the betrayal. Not just the affair but the months of lies, the secret phone, the elaborate deception. The fact that she'd been planning to leave me entirely. The fact that when confronted with Jeremy's criminality, her first instinct had been to run away with him rather than come home to me. One morning in early January, I made my decision. While Dorothy was still sleeping, I packed my belongings and loaded them into my truck. I left her a letter on the kitchen table. Dorothy, I've thought about this for weeks and I've come to realize that I can't get past what happened between us. It's not just about Jeremy or even about the affair. It's about the fact that when you were unhappy in our marriage, instead of fighting for us, you chose to build a secret life with someone else. I don't think I can ever trust you again, and a marriage without trust isn't really a marriage at all. I'm filing for divorce. You can keep the house and most of our savings. I just want this to be over. Roger. I moved into a small apartment across town and threw myself into work. The divorce proceedings were mercifully quick and quiet. Dorothy didn't contest anything and our lawyers handled most of the details. Our adult children were devastated, of course. They kept hoping we'd reconcile, kept suggesting family therapy or trial separations instead of divorce. But I knew in my heart that too much damage had been done. The final divorce decree was granted on a rainy Tuesday in March. 35 years of marriage legally ended with a judge's signature and a stamp. 6 months later, I heard through the Springfield Gossip Network that Dorothy had moved to Arizona to be closer to Marcus and his family. I was glad she'd found somewhere to start over. As for Jeremy, he was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for bank fraud and embezzlement. I sometimes wonder if Dorothy ever thinks about him, if she still believes any part of what he told her was real. It's been 2 years now since that accidental text message changed my life forever. I still live in my small apartment, still work at the garage, still eat dinner alone most nights. Some people might call it a sad existence, but I've found a kind of peace in its simplicity. I've learned that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones capable of surprising us the most. I've learned that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. And I've learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you once loved is to let them go, even when it breaks your heart to do it. The strangest part is that I don't hate Dorothy for what she did. I understand now that she was lost, looking for something she thought was missing from her life. She made terrible choices, but she was also manipulated by a practiced predator who knew exactly how to exploit her vulnerabilities. I just wish she had talked to me first. I wish she had given us a chance to fix what was broken before she went looking for happiness somewhere else. But you can't build a marriage on wishes and regrets. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Dorothy had never sent that text message by mistake. Would she have eventually left me for Jeremy anyway? Would I have lived the rest of my life never knowing that my wife was living a double life? I think in the end I'm grateful that the truth came out when it did. Living a lie, even a comfortable one, is no way to spend the years you have left. These days I find satisfaction in simple things, fixing engines, watching baseball, reading books I never had time for when I was married. It's not the life I planned, but it's an honest one. And sometimes that's enough. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.